find interesting about ethics is that it's the type of area in philosophy that can be as abstract as any other idea, but it also, of all the philosophical disciplines, is probably one of the ones that makes the most contact with the day-to-day world.
So today I'm here with Dr. Favela and we are discussing his work within ethics. So my first question is, across disciplines, ethics means different things to different scholars. What is ethics to you?
Well, ethics to me is philosophy that studies right and wrong action, right and wrong behavior, right and wrong concepts, how to act in the world. And what I find interesting about ethics is that it's the type of area in philosophy that can be as abstract as any other idea. So what is goodness, what is evil, things like this can be very abstract. But it also, of all the philosophical disciplines, is probably one of the ones that makes the most contact with the day-to-day world. So you can go as extreme as, is there a God's eye perspective on goodness in the world? But you can go as simple and as basic, and I put that in quotes because it's often not very simple or basic, but what decisions do I make in the day-to-day world? Is it okay to eat meat? Is it okay to not eat meat? Is it okay to not vote? Is it okay to vote, right? It's like all these different kinds of things are very day-to-day and very real issues. So I find it a very, very rich area in philosophy for those who like the abstract and the concrete.
Right. Okay. So what pushed you to study mind sciences within philosophy?
Yeah, so I actually, one of my original interests was to do ethics as one of my primary areas, but I just didn't think I was that good at it. And I found that I was actually maybe a little bit better at the mind science stuff, because I thought, talking about, good and evil, right and wrong, what is moral, what is immoral, that was like above my pay grade. I was like, I don't think I can reason that well. But I could do like science stuff, like no problem. No problem, but relative. It's very troublesome in some ways. But what got me into studying, philosophy of mind and issues like that was trying to understand the human experience. So I was originally a English literature major as an undergrad, and I taught high school English. And I always kept going back and reading philosophy, and I kept reading like existentialists like Nietzsche and Sartre, people like that. And I was trying to think what is it about, why do I keep going back to philosophy, but why am I interested in literature? And what I found was in literature they talked about the human experience, right? So I know a lot of people don't read a lot of the old novels anymore, but everything from Catcher in the Rye to 1984 to A Tale of Two Cities to Shakespeare's plays, it was what it's like to be a human in the world, right? And I found that philosophers brought a very, not just critical eye, but a systematic eye. Okay, so maybe Dickens is talking about this or Shakespeare's talking about this, but let's systematize it. Let's have a system of thought. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then I was interested in the mind, and it's what is it to perceive the world and have feelings and sensations, and I went to this point where I hit and I said, well, philosophers are really good at this. And then I hit a point where I said philosophers are very bad at this, because they were just making very odd claims. I thought well, I could have the same brain as Muppy on another Earth, but maybe I have consciousness and my other one doesn't. Or maybe there's a swamp creature that can be generated randomly in the Florida, swamps or something like that. And would it have consciousness or not? And I was like, well, that's kind of fun, I guess, maybe to get people into studying this. But the mind sciences, the neuro people, they seem to be doing something, right? They seem to, curing diseases and stuff. And they have really expensive equipment. I was like, I want a piece of that. And so I started getting into interdisciplinary approaches, because then as I hit that point where I said philosophers are being weird about these issues, the science people are doing something great. The more I learned about the science, the more I was like, but they're doing a lot of baloney too. They need some philosophical work to check their claims and stuff. So it's been this kind of cyclic process that got me into studying the mind in the way that I do.
Okay, so then that leads me to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about connections of ethics to your work specifically?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I was originally interested in ethics, and I thought that would be one of my primary areas of research and study. And like I said, I didn't think I was like that good at it. You know, the philosophical argument, the use of intuitions and things like that. So I haven't had a chance to really make ethics like my research focus, but what I tend to do is include ethics in pretty much all the classes that I teach. So there's always some sort of ethics component. So in my intro to philosophy class, there's definitely a section on ethics, you know, what are the ethical approaches, do animals have rights, you know, kind of like, you know, issues like that to get people thinking. But I'm also interested in the ways that ethical issues intersect with the mind sciences. No surprise there, given what I said a little bit ago about my interests. So I've taught a course on neuroethics. And what can the sciences tell us about our ethical theories, but how do we interpret the science via our ethical theories? So I'm interested in teaching that and getting students to think about those issues as well.
So my next question is, has ethics been a large part of your work? Which you kind of answered,
Yeah,
but I mean, you
yeah.
could expand on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it hasn't been a large part of my research. It's been a very large part of my teaching. It's been a large part of my service also. So I've, you know, worked on various committees, you know, for issues related to diversity and equity, you know, things like that. So I think, you know, the ethical issues there are very important. Again, that's an area where ethics makes contact with, you know, the day-to-day world. But, you know, although I don't, you know, when I say research ethics as a primary topic for me, that, you know, I don't publish in ethics journals on, you know, was Kant right or was Mill right, or what is the best ethical theory to understand non-human animal rights or something like that. But ethics, I think, is imbued in much of the work that we do as scientists. So I don't think that, you know, science is disconnected from values. So we make choices about the things that we study. Why is it that you know, certain kinds of cancers receive more funding when people are dying of other kinds of cancers or other kinds of diseases more? You know, why do we do that? Why do we choose to do that? Why are we okay with experimenting on certain kinds of non-human animals but not others? You know, all these issues really inform, you know, even, you know, basic science, which is supposed to be knowledge for knowledge's sake. Why do we make the choices that we make? And I think at the core of it is our values, which is our morals and our ethics, right? They decide, you know, those things.
Mm-hmm. So, could you expand on your book that you wrote, The Ecological Brain?
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be coming out soon. But the ecological brain is essentially an attempt to make nobody happy and everybody maybe like a little bit more open-minded. So who am I making upset? Actually, my first chapter is titled Making Everybody Upset. So the project is about trying to make these two approaches to understanding the mind maybe a little bit more friendly with each other. So on the one hand, you have some kinds of neuroscientists who think, well, the only important stuff, or the most important stuff about the mind is what happens in the brain. So maybe my memories, maybe how I control my movements, imagination, reasoning, all this kinds of stuff. Maybe it's just located in between my ears. And everything else is just kind of the vehicle for transporting my brain. Well, on the other side of the spectrum are people who say, well, you know, brains are obviously important, but a lot of what we do requires, in a very important way, that we have a body. We are in the world, and that the way the world is structured structures our thinking. So I might, you know, count and use my fingers. I still do that. So I go to the grocery store, I'm like, how many bananas did I need to get, right? And why am I doing that? Well, I'm offsetting my ability to quantify things to an external representation, which is my body, right? If counting was just an abstract, mathematical, platonic thing, why do I need to use my fingers if it could just be calculated in my mind, right? So these are some of the kinds of issues that you know, need to be reconciled, I think, if we want a more holistic, complete picture of intelligent behavior, cognition, reasoning, stuff like that. So What is the ecological brain? Well, it's the idea that a brain is always in an environment. It's in the environment of the skull, it's in the environment of the body, it's in the environment of the world. Right now we have a very particular kind of environment, right? The way I interact with you and with the camera in front of me is a way that I'm not going to interact if the camera's not there, or if you're not here, right? Or if, we're having, or if this is the same, but maybe you're just like, maybe you're in a bad mood or something, I can sense it, or I say something wrong that like makes you upset or something like that. That's going to change the way I react. I might, recourse back a little bit and think differently. And I think that's all, important to understand the ecology of thinking, right? And so my attempt is to trace in this book, how do we think in a scientific way about thinking? How did we come to these different perspectives where we just focus on the brain, or we focus not on the brain at all, but on the body and the world? And is there a way to give a more complete kind of picture?